Hi, it's Roger, creator of the Azure Sandbox. I'm back. In our previous video, we had just wrapped up provisioning VNet Shared, which is the first required configuration for the Azure Sandbox. And today we're going to pick up with VNet App. So I'll go ahead and navigate up to our handy vanity URL, which is aka.ms/Azure Sandbox. And that'll take us up to the Azure Architecture Center. And down here in the deployment section, there's a link to the GitHub repo. We'll just go straight over there. And we just finished this step to apply the default, the VNet shared configuration using all the default settings. So let's move on to VNet app. So, few notes on the architecture for VNet app. VNet app's probably the beefiest configuration of all of the configurations in the sandbox. So you can see VNet shared is over here. This is what we provisioned previously. VNet app includes a new virtual network, VNet-app-01, and the address space I use for that is at 10.2 with a /16. So you can see VNet shared is 10.1, VNet app is 10.2. And then I carve that VNet up into 4 subnets. And only 2 of those are actually going to get used as part of this configuration. The other ones are getting created in advance for future use. So the first one is this app-01 subnet, and that's 10.2.0/24. And I'm going to use that to drop our jump boxes in there. And there's 2 jump boxes. There's a Windows jump box, JumpWin1, and there's a Linux jump box. And both of those will have NICs that get private IP addresses in this 10.2 IP address range. We also have an Azure file share that gets provisioned as part of this. And that's going to get dropped in this private link-01 subnet. And I use 10.2.2 for that. So that private endpoint is used to access Azure files, which is good from a security perspective. So those 2 subnets will be the primary ones that get used. You'll notice I have VNet peering established here between the app subnet and the shared services, the app VNet and the shared services VNet. So when I provision, say, JumpWin1, I'm going to actually domain join it to the mysandbox.local domain over here in ADDS1. And Jump Linux 1 also gets domain joined as far as, Linux boxes can be domain joined. Basically, I set up Kerberos authentication on it so that you can log in with mysandbox.local accounts. And then this storage account, this Azure Files share that sits on top of our storage account also gets domain joined to the mysandbox.local domain using Kerberos authentication. So, all of these systems that we're deploying here wind up making use of this domain that we created previously in VNet Shared. We're going to use the Bastion host to connect up to our jump box, JumpWin1, and then we'll use JumpWin1 to SSH into Jump Linux 1. So really, you only have one VM that you need to worry about connecting to here, and we're going to do that through the secure Bastion host. So we talked about the peerings. Oh yeah, of course, the DNS. The DNS server address for VNet app is set to our DNS server, which is running on this ADDS1 VM over here in AD integrated mode. And then there's a secondary DNS address which sends it off to Azure, the Azure DNS resolver. So if we can't resolve a DNS query using our private DNS server, we'll ship it off to Azure and see how whether we can get it resolved. I also set up 3 private DNS zones in advance. Not all of these things are going to get used in this configuration, but I wanted to do it all in one place. The one that does get used is this private link.file.core.windows.net. That's for our Azure file share down here. The other ones, the private link.database.windows.net and the private link or private.mysql.database.azure.com, those get used in future configurations. But since I'm setting up the subnets and all the DNS stuff as part of VNet app, I just wanted to configure all those things in one place. So JumpWin1 gets pre-configured with all kinds of stuff. It includes a bunch of admin tools for Windows Server. So all the stuff that you would need to administer the Active Directory domain services, all those tools are installed. All the tools that you need to administer the DNS server on ADDS1, those are also installed here on JumpWin1. And then I also install a bunch of packages using Chocolatey. So that includes Azure PowerShell, VS Code, SQL Server Management Studio, Azure Storage Explorer, AZ Copy, Azure Data Studio, and MySQL Workbench. Those all get pre-installed on JumpWin1. And I do that using Azure Automation Desired State Configuration. So as part of this configuration, we're going to make changes to our automation account so that we get those configurations for JumpWin1 uploaded and compiled so that we can register JumpWin1 with Azure Automation Desired State Configuration. We also pre-configure a bunch of software on Jump Linux 1 in advance. And we actually do that using not Azure Automation Desired State Configuration, but with the different technology that's common for Linux called Cloud-init. So on that, we install the Azure CLI, we install Terraform, we install PowerShell, we install JP, and then a bunch of packages that are used for the Kerberos authentication for that Linux box so that you can log into it using Kerberos credentials. So all those things get pre-configured. So basically when you bring this up, everything's domain joined and ready to roll. Okay. So I think I covered most of this overview. We talked about the virtual network and the virtual machines that are in there, the fact that we use private link, the fact that we set up virtual network peering with VNet shared. We talked about JumpWin1, we talked about Jump Linux 1, and we talked about the Azure Files share that we create for file sharing. And then here for before you start, it basically says, hey, you need to have VNet shared deployed prior to deploying VNet app. So if you haven't done that yet, you need to go do that first. And we'll pick up with getting started in the next video.